Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. But we can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Join the fight today. Give online at kyvoice.org or text KYVoice to 53555. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us, speak up, stay strong. You are Kentucky's voice.
Are you ready to stand for truth? Kentucky is at a crossroads, and we need voices that won't back down. This is your moment to rise, speak up, and be part of a movement that's changing the narrative in the Commonwealth. Kentucky's Voice is calling on bold citizen journalists, fearless editors, and those unafraid to speak truth in the public square. Volunteer, intern, contribute. Scan the QR code or visit kyvoice.org to join the fight. This is more than media. This is your moment. You are Kentucky's voice.
Open borders, shameful abandonment, disregard for human life, the prospect of more mandates and lockdowns, and the list goes on. Now more than ever, we need to stick together. Voting alone is not enough. We must use our dollars to support like-minded companies that fight for our rights and beliefs. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider who shares your values. Last year, we gave more than $500,000 to conservative causes. With your support, we'll give more than $1.5 million this year. It's time to band together and support companies that truly love America and fight for our freedoms. Will you join us?
Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. But we can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Join the fight today. Give online at kyvoice.org or text KYVoice to 53555. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us, speak up, stay strong. You are Kentucky's voice.
Are you ready to stand for truth? Kentucky is at a crossroads, and we need voices that won't back down. This is your moment to rise, speak up, and be part of a movement that's changing the narrative in the Commonwealth. Kentucky's Voice is calling on bold citizen journalists, fearless editors, and those unafraid to speak truth in the public square. Volunteer, intern, contribute. Scan the QR code or visit kyvoice.org to join the fight. This is more than media. This is your moment. You are Kentucky's voice.
Open borders, shameful abandonment, disregard for human life, the prospect of more mandates and lockdowns, and the list goes on. Now more than ever, we need to stick together. Voting alone is not enough. We must use our dollars to support like-minded companies that fight for our rights and beliefs. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider who shares your values. Last year, we gave more than $500,000 to conservative causes. With your support, we'll give more than $1.5 million this year. It's time to band together and support companies that truly love America and fight for our freedoms. Will you join us?
Is Kentucky's Voice Radio, covering the latest state and local issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
Hello, Kentuckiana, and welcome to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your special host, Dr. Lance Pearson, with the Kentucky Liberty Caucus and the Louisville Tea Party. Thank you for joining us. You were probably listening to us on 970 AM in the Louisville area. You can also catch this broadcast, this podcast, on a couple of different outlets. We are streaming live on Facebook. We're also streaming live on YouTube. You can find the YouTube channel by going to just searching in the search engine for either KY Voice or Kentucky's Voice. Be sure to like and subscribe the video so you get a notice anytime any of those videos play. We also broadcast this on local TV. That's channel 21 if you have Spectrum. I believe the times are 12:30, 4 p.m., and 8 p.m., but definitely check your TV guide to make sure that those times are right. We also have a web page that we want to help direct you to. That's kyvoice.org. That's kyvoice.org. We are a listener-supported radio program / podcast / TV program. So if you are willing to donate some money to help with expenses and staffing so that we can keep conservative voices on local radio, we would greatly appreciate your assistance. You can also reach us by text if you have questions or comments at 502-571-0970. That's 502-571-0970. You can also text KY Voice or Give to that number, and a pop-up will happen on your phone, so you can click on that link and it will take you to that donation website also. So we appreciate our listeners for their financial support, but also just your listenership. We try to keep you informed on conservative politics, both at the state and local election level, local politics, state politics, and we also deal occasionally with some national politics as well. We have a great show today. Later, I'm going to be joined by Representative Steve Doan, who drove all the way from Northern Kentucky. We'll talk about it when he gets here, but I believe he lives all the way in Campbell County, so just south of Cincinnati, but it's quite a haul, and so we appreciate him coming in on a legislative day before they really get into the action a little bit later. Okay, before we even get into the rest of the show, I want to address something. There was quite a lot of political activity, some of it quite dramatic, that went viral on social media and local politics. And so we're going to deal with a little bit of that at the end of the show, so hang on for that. But the first thing I want to address is an incident that happened at the Oldham County Lincoln Day dinner. So if our producer could just show this video real quick, and I will give you a recap to give you the context afterward.
You are a congressman. You work not for the Speaker of the House. Okay. I work for you. Welcome to the next bit, baby. Oh, yeah.
Okay. And so for the people that are watching online or that will watch this on TV later, you've got a little bit more context than the people that were listening. The Lincoln Day dinners are a get-together of the local Republican Party, not necessarily only the local party officials, but also just people that are passionate about local politics. and they often have speakers. In that clip, you saw our congressman for District 4, which is Shelby, Nelson County, Oldham County, Henry, Trimble, and then all the way up through just south of Cincinnati, all the way to western Kentucky into Boyd County. So he was giving a speech, and at the end of the speech, the Speaker of the House, a guy by the name of David Osborne, decided to cut him off by grabbing the mic and pulling it away from him. We'll talk a little bit more about that clip after the break. Stick with us. We are Kentucky's Voice.
Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your special host, Dr. Lance Pearson. At the very end of the last segment, just a minute ago, you saw a very brief clip of the very end of a speech by Congressman Thomas Massie at the Oldham County Lincoln Day dinner, where he was quite abruptly, a lot of people have described it as a mic snatch, where the Speaker of the House, David Osborne, grabbed the microphone away from Thomas Massie, and Thomas Massie looks like he's walking off camera and, out. So I just want to provide a little bit of context. David Osborne was serving as the MC of that event. There were, I believe, 6 speakers. The U.S. Senate candidates were all there with the exception of Daniel Cameron because he had a family emergency, which we won't discuss, but his wife stepped in and did an excellent job speaking on his behalf. So there was Daniel Cameron, Nate Morris, Andy Barr, and Michael Ferris, all given, I believe, 8 minutes to speak. The Congressman Thomas Massie and one of his challengers in the primary, Republican primary, guy by the name of Ed Galrine, were given 5 minutes. Now, I don't know why they were only given 5 minutes and the U.S. Senate candidates were only given 8. Speculations abound, I'm sure. Nevertheless, at the end of several of those speeches, they went long. So it isn't uncommon at these sorts of events that people will speak over their time. They got 8 minutes and they will speak for 9 or 10 minutes. Ultimately, several of these people are coming from very far away. And so if you drive 3 hours and Thomas Massie, for example, lives in Lewis County, he usually drives to these sorts of events. So that's at least a 3-minute drive. That's at least a 3-hour drive both ways. And so, at least according to him, he was informed that he wouldn't have any time to speak. And then at the event or very shortly before the event, he was told that he would have 5 minutes only. So one thing that he was addressing in those 5 minutes that caused him to run over is this tweet. If our producer happens to have the image of Donald Trump speaking about Thomas Massie's wife. All right, and I'll just read it for the people that are on the radio. Donald Trump said, "People are saying," and basically that allows Donald Trump to say anything. People are saying, and then he can make any outlandish claim. People are saying that Thomas Massie became a liberal because his new wife, blessed be their marriage, is supposedly a radical left flamethrower. This new union all went so fast that maybe he didn't know what he was getting into. All right. So I want to just start off and just say there's no room in politics for people to get people's spouses involved, especially when that spouse is not out publicly speaking. So I think that tweet to begin with was totally inappropriate by Donald Trump. And so Thomas Massie earlier said that he wanted to speak for at least a minute, and he made clear it was probably going to cause him to go over because he wanted to defend his wife. Now, his wife, to be perfectly clear, is the exact opposite of a radical left flamethrower. She actually worked on the campaigns of Rand Paul, hardly a liberal by any stretch. I believe he has something like a 98% liberty score, one of the most conservative congressmen. She also volunteered her time for National Right to Work. She worked with Ron Paul. So all the way back from the time when she was a teenager. So basically almost her whole adult life, she has been working in conservative politics. And so just saying that people are saying does not give you permission to just make up lies about people. So Thomas Massie took about a minute defending his own wife during that speech. That caused him to run over by a minute, maybe even a minute and a half. And at the end, you heard Thomas Massie making the statement that he doesn't work for the speaker, he works for you. He works for his constituents in his district. Now, he was not referencing David Osborne when he made that statement. I want to be clear. He was actually referring to Mike Johnson. There could have been some confusion there, given that David Osborne is the Speaker of the Kentucky House. Thomas Massie works in D.C. in Congress with Mike Johnson, who's the current Speaker of the House in D.C. I also want to just give a little bit of back context. That venue is extremely wide. They put Thomas Massie in the very far corner, so it looks like he's walking out of the building. He was actually just returning to his table. They stuck him in arguably the worst table at the event. He then, after some of the people left because of the abrupt nature in which David Osborne snatched the mic away, some of the people walked out, and he eventually wound up joining them and going to have dinner and drinks after this event. I also want to give a little bit more context. I've gone to at least the last 3, maybe 4 of these events. I did not go to this one because I knew it was going to be quite contentious and just basically a mess. Let's just say that. I had some other words, but let's just say it would be a mess. 2 years ago, David Osborne refused to acknowledge that State Senator Lindsey Titchener, who lives in Oldham County, was even at the event. He acknowledged people as low on the political power food chain. Not that magistrates are low, but he acknowledged basically 4 or 5 magistrates that were at the event, but he refused to acknowledge the first female state representative to represent the county, Lindsey Titchener. He's also gotten in some hot water for some of his decisions in the General Assembly, like stripping people of committees when they don't basically go along with whatever his plan is. So it's a situation where there's a little bit of a fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, shame on you in terms of this sort of behavior. I just want to say in general, I hope people apologize. We get back to working together with one another, because there really is no place in politics for a continued pattern of, I would go as far as to say that some of the behavior has been petty and vindictive. Okay, fortunately, we finally have our guest on. Our guest is State Representative Steve Doan. Steve Doan, I believe, came all the way from Campbell County, but when he can speak, he can correct me. Maybe he lives in Kenton County. But either way, he is the state representative for District 69. So welcome on. I believe he's actually been on the show once before, maybe with Andrew Cooperrider, who usually does Wednesdays.
We don't mention the other host yet.
No. I'll mention Cooperrider. He does a fantastic job. You can catch him on Wednesdays usually on here. So, Steve, let me just hop right into it because we got a lot of stuff to cover. You sponsored a lot of bills, so I want to go through them because I think with one exception, and we may not even talk about that bill, I like all of them. So let me just hop in and just before we hit our first break, just tell me what your impressions are so far in the session. What are your just impressions about the budget, which is the biggest bill that's going to come through in this session? That's actually mandated by the Constitution that you pass a budget. So talk about a little bit about that and what your impressions are of the process so far. You're about a month and a half into it of a 4-month process.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm from Kenton County, House District 69 out of Kenton. I cover Kenton and Boone counties over there. It's been an interesting session. It kind of started slow, and then we ended up having that snow day. They canceled session, and it threw all the committees off, and everything got really messed up. But now we've started to hit the flow. It's been an interesting session, and different than a lot of the past. It feels very warm. It's a very feel-good session down there. Everybody's getting along. We're all working together. And so, we talk about that budget that's coming through. There may be some contention later on. I think it's a pretty good budget that's come out so far. I like to call it the slim, beautiful bill that Representative Petrie has filed. And look, what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out what does the executive branch do with our money. We send a lot of money over to them, and they never want to report back to us, or they never want to tell us what they actually do with that money. And so that's part of it. Usually we file that budget, and then it goes straight over to the Senate. We get out of the House pretty quick, so we can get over there. What we're doing differently this year is we're taking we have budget review committees, and we're taking that budget into each one of those budget review committees, and we're forcing the executive branch to justify why they have that amount of money or why they need that amount of money. So there's been a lot of consternation from everybody that has their hand out for government funds, but I think it's a necessary thing, and I give a lot of credit to Chairman Petrie and to the Vice Chairman Bowling and Bray for having the guts to do that.
Right. And now, keep in mind the budget is a very long process. The Senate very likely will try to add quite a bit of pork back into this. And who knows, there will be probably some voices in the House caucus as well who would like to spend a little bit on some pet projects as well. So it's going to be quite a battle trying to keep that budget as slim as it is, or even slimmer would be my preference, probably yours too. But nevertheless, the budget as it presently is constituted is quite good from a fiscal conservative standpoint. You can't get everything that you want. We only have about 8 seconds left. Thank you for joining us. Oh, I'm sorry. We actually have an extra minute. So, as you were saying, what are some of the priority things that you think that the Senate is going to try to add into this budget that you want to continue to fight against?
It's difficult to say. You're going to have two budget bills, so to speak. You're going to have the executive branch budget, and then you're going to have House Bill 1. And House Bill 1 is going to be that one-time spending. So
right.
That's where we're going to look for pork and that kind of stuff.
Right. And keep in mind, there's also a lot of transportation. You also vote on a transportation bill as part of this. So I believe I think it's as much as $16 billion a year gets appropriated in this budget bill. All right. Now we are going to go to the break. Join us after this, and we'll continue talking about legislation with Steve Doan.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your special host, Dr. Lance Pearson with the Kentucky Liberty Caucus and also the Louisville Tea Party. A little bit of self-promotion, and I'll do this once more. I'll take the liberty. The Louisville Tea Party is actually hosting a mayoral candidate forum tonight at 6 p.m. at Roosters in Middletown. I think it's like 10,340. It's by Planet Fitness or some sort of gym there on Middletown and just off of Shelbyville Road. So if you want to come out for that, there is very limited seating. It's more of an intimate forum, but we are going to try to live stream it if we can get that to work. So you will be able to find that video online. All right. We are joined again with Representative Steve Doan, who joined us all the way from Kenton County. I errantly said Campbell. I'm sorry. And he represents State District 69, just south of Cincinnati. So you filed a lot of bills. A lot of these are continuations of past bills that haven't yet moved. That's not unusual. Often it takes multiple sessions of just, winning support for a bill and getting everybody in the caucus in line, and then even getting some Democrats on board with a lot of this legislation. So the first bill I want to talk about is House Bill 161. Mm-hmm. I believe this is a bill that relates to allowing the public to use some of the athletics facilities that public schools, basically the public funded, these public school facilities. The public should be able to use that when they're not being used for school activities. So tell me a little bit about that bill.
Sure. So this bill came about because I like to run. I wanted to be able to run on our school track. It was previously open, and then the school district spent about $3.3 million doing renovations. It was all COVID money that they used to do these renovations. And once the renovations were complete, they decided, hey, the public doesn't have a right to use this thing anymore. So they closed it down. I had met with the superintendent. I'd sent him an email asking about getting this thing opened back up. And it was just flat denied. They had no interest in it. And what I didn't know at the time, but I know now through an open records request, is that some emails had been exchanged between the chairman of the school board and between the superintendent and the other members of the board, likely a violation of the Open Meetings Act. And in one of those emails, it said, Doan represents the mostly Republican constituency in the district that believes that they are entitled to something from government because they pay taxes.
A radical notion, yeah.
An insane notion that you pay taxes and you should get some government benefit from the taxes that you pay. And so I decided, I'm going to file this bill. I'm going to push this bill. I pushed it a little bit in the interim and got a lot of support. I mean, people out of Lexington, they were reaching out to me saying, hey, our schools have shut this thing down. I met with superintendents from other districts in northern Kentucky, and they say, yeah, our tracks are open to the public. They should be open to the public. So we filed that bill. I don't know if we'll move it or not. It certainly is one that we probably should. It just makes sense that we would do that and maybe stick it to school boards everywhere and let them know if you're going to play partisan politics, we can play those right back at you. Yeah. And but we've got that bill. Maybe we can get some of that language included in a budget bill, that we talked about, a budget bill. There'll be some school funding bills for construction projects. Maybe that's somewhere that we put that language in to just say, look, if you've got tracks or playgrounds or anything like that, why wouldn't it be open to the public?
Yeah, I think that's total common sense. And just to kind of bring this back to some of our listeners, my mom would really enjoy the ability to go out and walk, just for exercise. We live on a street that we don't have sidewalks. So if she wanted to go right out of her house and just walk up the street, it would actually be quite dangerous. She's not all that mobile. And so the ability to use that track that's not being used, we're not talking about we're going to cancel the track meet or this is going to be during a football game. This is while the facilities are not being used for any other purpose. You said $3.3 million for the track. Why are we not allowing our public to make use of that? So it's just common sense.
From my front yard, I live right next to school. From my front yard, I can see the track. Yeah. And I can see that it's not used. Yeah. I ran an ultra marathon in June of last year, of 2025. And, to train for that, you're running, at least a half marathon every single day. And I'll tell you, every day I would go out and get hit by a car. I mean, it didn't matter. Distracted driver, somebody rolls over a stop sign a little more. Every single day I got hit by a car. None of them were severe, but after you get hit on that bumper a couple times, it gets really frustrating. So, I've always wanted to go and pull the numbers. How many additional people are injured or hurt because the school just doesn't want folks to be on the track?
Absolutely. All right. The second bill, you've got quite a bit of recent publicity. You actually got on Spectrum News. I watched some coverage of this. House Bill 276, also known as the chicken bill, would allow or actually force municipalities to allow people to keep up to 6 chickens, importantly not roosters, in their backyard in confinement.
Sexist, but I get it.
Yeah, exactly. So just tell me a little bit about that bill. I know it seems kind of silly, but I'm going to make an argument later, if he doesn't make it, that this is actually very impactful. So go ahead.
Sure. So when I first got onto Erlanger City Council, it had been a fight in our community. Should we allow backyard chickens or not? And the mayor came to me and asked me to propose the legislation, and we were able to get it through. So the first piece of law that I ever made was to allow backyard chickens in Erlanger. Shortly thereafter, Ellesmere, another city that I represent now, decided that they wanted to take our ordinance and implement it as well. And so the gentleman, Eric is his name, that helped Ellesmere pass it, came to me and said, let's do it statewide. Let's blow the whole thing wide open. So I filed the bill last year. It was like 806, filed it late in the session. And it got a lot of traction online. A lot of people were pumped about it. I think I got more likes and retweets on that than I've ever gotten on anything in the past. And so, we carried it back. I testified on it in the interim and teed it up with a lot of support, and we were able to get that through in the House.
Yeah. Now, people think of this as kind of silly. They've nicknamed it the chicken bill, which I think is fine. That's fine. It is about chickens. But I want to make the argument that this can be hugely impactful, and we will talk in the next segment about some health initiatives. But 6 chickens will produce enough eggs to feed. It's certainly for one meal a day, but maybe even more than one meal a day, to feed a family. Multiple chickens. Each chicken will produce often more than 1 egg per day. So you're talking about a lot of eggs. If anybody, the chicken egg prices have come down quite a bit in the last month or so, but before that, they were astronomical. I mean, you were going into the grocery and it was $10 for a dozen of eggs. So it can have a significant economic impact. Now, we talk a lot about how we're reducing the income tax. Mm-hmm. A 0.5 point reduction in the income tax for a person that's making $30,000, and a lot of people in the state of Kentucky are making $30,000 or less. The median income in the state, I think, is only $45,000. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of people that are making $30,000 or less. That half a point, you're only talking about, somewhere in the range of a $200 reduction in taxes per year. I almost guarantee that those chickens will produce more than $150, $200 worth of eggs in a given. So everybody blows up about how important it is that we're reducing income taxes. This can actually have that kind of financial impact. Now, if you're thinking of doing this, they're a lot more work than you think that they are. And keeping those stray dogs and cats off of your chickens. We have had chickens before, and in my life and my family has raised chickens. This isn't a panacea, but nevertheless. So just talk about how this is actually a practical way to get the government out of something that they shouldn't be involved in, and can just give, especially young families, you can raise your kids and teach them this is where your food comes from.
Sure. So, Northern Kentucky, it's pretty chaotic. You've got a bunch of different cities, all in a tight area, all with different rules and regulations. And so that's kind of where this came from. I see it as a property rights issue. Yeah. Look, it's my land. I should be allowed to do with it what I want. The detractors to the bill say, well, we believe in local control. Well, I do too, but I believe in control so local that individual landowners are deciding what they do with that property. So I think it's a big deal, and I'm really excited to get that through, and hopefully we can pass it in the Senate.
Well, I think it's a great idea. I'm hopeful that it becomes viral and we get Democrats on board, and this can be a unifying bill for this session. We'll talk about some of the health initiatives that Steve Doan is spearheading in this next session, in the coming session. So join us after the break. We'll talk about MAHA.
back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. I want to remind our listeners, if they want to catch a rebroadcast of this, they can go on YouTube or Facebook. There is a live stream on the Kentucky's Voice channel on Facebook or on YouTube. Just do that search. Be sure to like and subscribe to those videos if you want to watch this. We also will rebroadcast this on local TV. If you have Spectrum, Channel 21, at I believe 12:30, 4, and 8 today. So check that out if you want. We are joined again by State Representative Steve Doan from District 69 in Northern Kentucky. In the last segment, we talked about two common sense pieces of legislation. Let's allow the public to use some of the school facilities that they fund and finance for just recreational activities. For example, allowing people to use the school track when the teams are not using that. We also talked about the chicken bill, allowing people to raise a small number of chickens in their backyard so they can produce eggs and basically teach their kids where does that food that they get in the grocery come from. Kind of piggybacking on some of that, which I think that's a health initiative. But you also have sponsored some legislation that relates to health more directly. So HB 277, this deals with school nutrition. Why don't you tell our listeners what that does, what that accomplishes, and kind of how it ties in with some federal initiatives even?
Sure. So this is one of the bills that I testified on in the interim in the MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, Kentucky Task Force. And so basically what this bill does is pretty simple. It's actually a Turning Point USA bill that they've done some model legislation on that around the country. They passed it in Arizona and California, I believe. But what this bill does is it defines ultra-processed foods, and it makes it so that anything with we list out all the chemicals, bromated vegetable oil, a lot of different other things. It just says, look, you can't serve these in Kentucky high schools. You know, if you want to still sell them at the basketball game, or you want to do a fundraiser with them after school hours, you can do that there. But we just want to get that stuff out of school lunches. We don't want that being in your body while you're there trying to learn and get educated.
Right. Now, has there been like a cost-benefit analysis in terms of like the actual financial impact of this? And like I'm fully on board in terms of eating all of the stuff that kids are being fed today in schools. It doesn't teach them healthy habits for when they become adults. Let's just say that. But is this going to cost the state a ton of money? Has there been an analysis of that? It
shouldn't. I've met with the Beverage Association. You know, anybody, the lobbyists that have a vested interest in products that have these chemicals in them, and they indicated to me they're not selling those or marketing those towards schools anyway.
Good.
I met with a wonderful lady from the Franklin County schools. I'm not sure if it was Franklin County or Franklin City, but they have a scratch kitchen there, and they make all their own food. And she indicated to me the only thing that they would have to sacrifice would be Lucky Charms, which is just, that's terrible.
I think they'll live without that.
Yeah, that's terrible for the leprechaun, but good for the kids. Okay. And, you know, KDA got back to me on it. I asked them, and they didn't have any real qualms with the bill from what I could gather.
Okay. And now, how does this tie in? I know that several states have passed kind of these initiatives that attempt to take sugary drinks and, you know, ho-hos and fudge rounds or whatever off of SNAP and WIC, these government nutritional assistance programs. Mm-hmm. Is there any momentum in the legislature to do something like that in Kentucky also?
I'm not sure if a bill's been filed yet on it. I know that I have people ask me to file one a whole lot, and I can't recall if the MAHA task force testified on it. I know that Representative Proctor, who was on that task force, is very big on this issue, very much wants to see something happen there. Yeah. I think the will's there. Yeah. We have in the past tweaked or tuned up SNAP benefits to some degree. We passed last year that you had to be an able-bodied. If you were able-bodied, you had to work in order to keep your benefits, or at least start looking for
common
employment.
Sense again.
So I think within the caucus there is certainly the will to do some of these things. It just becomes a matter of, can we get that to the floor? Is there a good, clean bill that everybody's had a say on?
Right. And now, to be clear, I don't want the government telling me what I can or cannot eat or anything.
Absolutely.
But when we're talking about public financing, when it's my money that is going to these programs, with your own money, go buy some ho-hos. That's none of my business. But if you're using my money to do it, or we're talking about our kids in public schools, they should basically, it's a supplemental nutrition program. So you would think that the products that they're able to buy should actually be nutritious, not just a bunch of junk food and snacks and basically someone just drinking a bunch of sugary stuff that's going to give them diabetes with my tax money, so that then I now have to pay for their Medicare, Medicaid, all that other stuff. And it all rolls downhill. And
that's consistent between the two bills. You know, the ultra-processed foods in schools, that government's directing you to that, so government can make the call on what is or isn't in there. And then on the SNAP and WIC, government is telling what you can and can't buy with that money. And so that's perfectly consistent with what you're saying.
All right. And now a second bill that I think relates very closely to this. The biggest health issues that we have in the state is basically obesity and obesity-related health problems, which spirals into cardiac problems. It also, diabetes is a chronic illness that's extraordinarily expensive for the state. And so one of the bills that you have filed also is a bill that relates to hospital price transparency. If you have gone to a hospital recently and gotten the actual bill, not the bill that you get after it goes through the insurance company, if they give you the unredacted bill, you will be amazed. And I actually do work in healthcare, so it's amazing how much the expense of healthcare from all of these chronic diseases is in the United States relative to the rest of the world even. So one of the things that I think probably is going to help is if people, when they go into those medical stays, they know ahead of time just how much money is going to be required to pay for whatever their hospital visit is, or the procedure, or the emergency room stay, all that stuff. So just talk to me about that bill. This is Bill 278, I believe.
I have filed so many bills that I never remember any of the numbers of. But the hospital price transparency bill, so where this came from, Donald Trump in his first term had done an executive order requiring that hospitals do this thing. He lost the 2020 election, and ultimately that never got implemented under the Biden administration. I filed this bill. I think this is the third year in a row that I filed this bill. And basically it just, and Donald Trump has since now reintroduced that executive order at the federal level to require that hospitals do this. Again, still not been implemented fully. But that's what this is. This is Donald Trump's healthcare plan to make sure that people know what they're actually paying for. It's gained a lot of momentum nationwide. The first year I filed it, we kind of just put it out there to see what would happen. The second year, John Bones Jones, so the UFC fighter, maybe one of the baddest men alive, he's actually a big proponent of this bill. He's a sponsor. He works with some national groups to help push and get this thing over the end of the line. So if the chairman of any of the committees are listening, we can have a good celebrity come in and testify on this. If you want, maybe we'll punch somebody.
It worked with Michael Kidd Gilchrist on the stuttering bill.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And so, I hope we can get this through. And what you kind of see in all these bills that I've filed is we've got to start taking public health seriously in this Commonwealth.
That's right.
We just have absolutely abysmal health outcomes, and it's important that we do something to make sure that we're doing better. When I had a job working for Governor Bevin, I was the general counsel for the Governor's Office of Agricultural Policy. And what I did is I went around and toured agricultural facilities throughout the entire state. So we gave them out money and helped them do other kind of things and projects. But what it became apparent to me is that the vast majority of the food we eat, we don't know where it comes from. And so all of this stuff dovetails together, all these bills that I've filed, to actually present some kind of a make Kentucky healthy again, a platform and a plan that we can actually address the public health crisis that we've failed to address for so long.
Yeah. Now, and I didn't pull this chart up ahead of time, but there's a chart that you can find online, and it's like since, I don't know, the year 2000 or maybe it's the year 1980, the change in cost for various services, and it's like the cost of television since that time has just plummeted. It's like you can get a 80-inch TV now for what you used to be able to get with like one of those gigantic box TVs that you could barely see in. But like the two things that have skyrocketed the most is the cost of tuition for colleges and healthcare costs. Yep. And so both of those are heavily government subsidized and regulated. And I think that's a theme. In general, when the government is super involved in regulating an industry rather than letting market forces play out, that the costs just skyrocket. And there tends to be an explosion in fraud, and we've had a lot of stories in the news recently about fraud of government programs. So I think the general idea is great. Obviously, we're talking about hospital transparency. There's a lot of negotiations that have to go on there, but the general idea is great. You should know ahead of time how much something is going to cost so that you can actually drive down the cost by selecting, somebody that can do the procedure for half the cost. We don't have that. You just go in and you get procedures from whoever wants it, and they charge you for anything that they want. And so it just doesn't work like a normal market.
Yeah, I mean, could you imagine going to a grocery store or a car dealership or you fill your cart up full of groceries and you get out there and they just tell you it's $1 million and you have no idea what you're actually paying there.
Now, both of these bills, actually all these bills, I think are common sense, but especially these health bills, it isn't at all, to me, a partisan issue. Democrats in general agree on these things just as much as Republicans. Can you talk about that, how this can be a unifying type of focus?
Well, I was so pleased watching the Super Bowl last night that I saw the commercial. I'm probably not allowed to mention that word. But, I saw that commercial where Mike Tyson came out and the RFK Maha slogan is now, eat real food. And that's part of the big solution to this. And you're seeing the Republicans, you're seeing Democrats, everybody's glomming onto this issue because it's so critical and we've got to get ahead of it.
Right. Now, I personally think that actually these 4 bills, I would love to get certainly 3 of the 4. I think the hospital price, there's a lot of negotiations that are still left to that, so that might get delayed. But, and I'm not saying you're going to get 3 bills passed this session. That's highly unusual that anyone gets those. But I would love all these because I think as our listeners have listened, those are all just common sense things that would have a daily impact on your average citizen. So much of the legislation that comes out of especially the federal government, but even our state legislature, it just isn't clear how it impacts your everyday American. But where am I going to get the food that is going to come to my plates? Is that food going to be loaded up with chemicals and basically make me sicker the more that I eat it? Is my kid going to have healthy? Is my kid going to have healthy food? Am I going to be able to actually use some of the facilities that I paid for in order to exercise more? So I think all of those are just common sense things that both Democrats and Republicans can rally around. All right, we got about 10 seconds in this segment. Join us after the break and we'll talk about some more legislation from Steve Doan, representative for District 69. You're on Kentucky's Voice. I'm your host, Dr. Lance Pearson.
back to Kentucky's Voice Radio online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your special host, Dr. Lance Pearson with the Kentucky Liberty Caucus and the Louisville Tea Party. Again, I want to promote our mayoral forum. We basically are having the who I consider to be the best candidates to potentially replace Mayor Greenberg in the next session. I think we have 4 or 5 candidates that will be there. It will just basically be an opportunity for you to interact with them, ask a few questions of them, and hear from them what their perspectives are on what's going right and what's going wrong with the city and their ideas for how to fix some of those issues. So that's at Roosters in Middletown on Shelbyville Road. I think the address is 10430 Middletown Road, but it's basically in one of those strip malls by Planet Fitness or one of those workout studios. So we would love to have you there. It is limited. I think there's maybe a 50 or 60 person limit. So if you want to actually get a seat in there, get there early and order your food early and get ready for some local politics talk. All right. I'm joined again by State Representative Steve Doan. We're honored to have him. He has actually, I consider some of these bills like some of the most common sense legislation that would radically change in a positive direction the state. He's actually addressing some fundamental issues. And so one of those bills that I think is a great way to address a fundamental issue is dealing with licensure in the state. So people are generally not aware of it, but almost every sort of business that you want to start in the state, like almost to an absurd extent, requires you to have some sort of certification, that you went to some amount of education about this or that. It's not, oh, I can actually do the work. It's, have I gone through all of these hoops that the state has set up for me to have to go through in order to even get into that business. So especially someone that doesn't have a bachelor's or a master's or a PhD, they're coming out of high school, they're ready to work, they're a hard worker, they learn fast, they want to just go and get basically be an apprentice and learn the trade from someone who's been doing it. There usually is not a straightforward path to do that because we have just a plethora of boards. I think we got over 500 boards in the state of Kentucky. That may be an exaggeration, but it might not. It may not. It's absurd how many boards we have in the state. So tell me about this bill. I think the bill number is 458. 458. Yeah. It's a universal licensure bill, and my summary of it, and you can correct me, is it basically says that if you are licensed in another state to perform whatever the job is, and especially if you've been doing that job already, you can come work in the state of Kentucky without having to jump through all these extra hoops. So go ahead and talk about that bill and just explain the intricacies and what the barrier is to this.
No, that's a great summary of the bill. And it's universal. It's every occupation.
Yeah.
You'll see every year or so we chip away at this. We'll do it for cosmetologist or we'll do it for whatever little entity. But this goes broad-based. It looks at every single occupation. And we talked about healthcare. One of the folks that are most behind this bill is the healthcare industry because you can't get nurses, you can't get doctors. So what this does is it just creates a level playing field. We always talk about Kentucky being the donut hole of states. We look around us and we see everybody around us is doing something, but we just can't seem to get it right. Ohio has implemented this. Virginia has implemented this. Indiana has something similar. Tennessee has this. And so basically our folks can go straight over there and work almost day one. Under the bill, you would be able to get that license, a thumbs up or a thumbs down within 30 days. Right. Pay I think it's a $100 or a $50 fee to submit your application to work. And boom, you get licensed just like that. So it's when we talk about, you had mentioned income tax earlier in the day. Part of the reason we want to cut our income tax is to attract new industry, new business, new jobs, new people to the state. Absolutely. And so if we're going to try to attract new people, we need to make it easy for them to come here and work. My wife was a resident of Ohio when we were dating, and we got married, and I stole her and brought her into Kentucky.
Thank you.
She was a licensed optician, and she came to Kentucky and we required like 2-3 additional classes. And she said, look, I'm making, $50,000-$60,000 a year. It's just not worth it to me to go through these extra hoops, and did a total career change. And that always is surprising to me, that somebody's been in a career path or an industry and has a lot of technical expertise and just gives up on it because we put too many barriers to entry in order to get that new job. And so I think it's a common sense bill. We should pass it. We need to do it. A lot of states I think 26 states have already passed something like this. Yeah. So it just makes sense.
I know famously South Dakota may have gotten this started. I know Kristi Noem had all those ads, come and work in South Dakota. Why do we not want Kentucky to be a place where we encourage people to come and work? If you're already performing a task in another state, you're licensed, you've gone through all of their hoops. When they come to the state of Kentucky, what is it about, let's just use cutting hair. What is it about cutting hair that if you're certified in Ohio and you're cutting people's hair fine in Ohio, that you come over the border and you can't cut a mullet in the state of Kentucky now?
Man, you picked a good one. So I filed this bill 4 years in a row. The first year that I filed it, I had the executive director of the Board of Cosmetology come and meet with me in my office. And she made these wild accusations that sex trafficking would increase, that people would die or lose their fingers because, nail technicians didn't have special training or whatever coming from other states. I mean, it was just ridiculous. She's no longer in that position, by the way. She's been since removed. It was one of the great things it's one of the only good things that Andy Bashir ever did. But she's gone just because it was that attitude of, we're going to keep people out, we're going to use government to put our thumb on you and prevent you from earning an income. It is ridiculous to me.
Now, and let's be very clear about why a lot of these licenses exist. If you are in a business, let's say I have my own hair cutting salon or whatever, I'm a barber, and I don't want competition. How do I prevent that? I can't keep somebody from opening up a shop down the street, but what I can do is make sure that I talk to that board and make the requirements for new barbers to come in that want to cut hair for $1 cheaper per haircut. Make sure that they can't even get into the business because we set up all these boards and all these restrictions and education, and the amount of education you need to be a cosmetologist or to cut people's hair it's absurd. I mean, we could do a whole show on just that. And so that's what a lot, I won't say every single one of these licensure requirements for our particular state or the restrictions that you're trying to address are like that, but almost all of them, if not all of them, are like that.
We have a lot of occupational licenses that other states don't even have.
Yeah,
I mean, silly things like taxidermy. In Indiana, you don't have to be a licensed taxidermist. Why would we? You're dealing with dead animals to begin with. Why would we really care? But in Kentucky, no, we require that you have some special license. And so a critical part of that bill is if you are from a state where that they don't have a license, but you have at least 1 year of experience working in that industry or working in that field, you can come in and that experience will apply to get your license here in Kentucky.
Okay. Now, let's talk quickly about a bill 526 that relates to the bar. That's basically the organization that certifies lawyers in the state of Kentucky. So talk about your bar bill.
So this bill had I'd passed it out of the House my first year as a state representative. I call it the crown jewel of right to work legislation. Attorneys are the only profession in the state that are required to join an association in order to earn a living. We passed right to work in, I think, 2017, somewhere around there when the Republicans took over the state house. But we didn't do it for lawyers. And so that's what this bill does. It gets back to that issue of occupational licensing. It's a free speech issue, to be quite honest. The Bar Association makes a lot of statements for lawyers that not all of us want them to make. And so why should I have to pay you money to go make statements that are adverse to my interest? So it goes into that licensing, into that occupational licensing issue. And I think we're going to get that through the House and hopefully be successful with it again.
Okay. Let me go ahead and transition into a political issue that occurred. I guess this was at the end of last week also. And that was, and this is to me quite unusual, that a couple of candidates for U.S. Senate in the state of Kentucky, and I believe it was Andy Barr and then Nate Morris also, decided that they would weigh in on another race that's happening in the state of Kentucky. And in particular, they offered an endorsement against a sitting congressman right now. So I know that you're really close with Representative Thomas Massie. I also am. I consider him a friend. You're probably a much better friend than I am because you live a lot closer to him and you interact with him a lot more. So can you just talk about that? I think basically they decided that they were going to endorse against a sitting congressman, but I think there was a bigger motivation than that. I actually think that Congressman Massie gets along with both of these guys in general as people. But what do you think the motivations were? And we can talk it out.
When it happened, I had a lot of people call me and want comment or ask how I felt about it. And I didn't really have the words to process it. All that I could say is just, it was a disappointment to me. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to have somebody come in with that much power and endorse against me, or with that kind of a reach, endorse against me in a race. You're on the ballot for your own Senate seat, for your own representative seat, whatever it is. Let your race be against your opponent. There's no need to gang up on people, and that's kind of how I felt about it. The poor guys had a tough week. And having the president lean on you like that, it's not easy.
Yeah.
But I got to give him all the credit in the world. I mean, he never seems down. I texted him immediately after that happened, and told him that I loved him and that I was supporting him no matter what. I was 100% behind him, and his response was gracious, and he just said, "Look, it ain't about me. They're trying to get a leg up in their race, and I think he's going to be just fine, and he'll work with those guys, whichever one gets in the future."
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be an issue with the, and quite likely neither of those people will get in. Who knows? There's a lot of people in that race, and they may not win.
It's a lot.
I do want to say, I think basically, to me, it was an issue of they were trying to court Trump's endorsement, which they think is going to be the decider in this race. I'm not so sure about that, and I'm not sure he's going to endorse. But they basically wanted to cozy up to whatever the messaging is that Trump's got. So they basically threw someone else under the bus to promote their own political career. I don't love that. I do want to give credit to Michael Ferris for the video that we showed earlier. If you want to go to his online account, you can find the full video from the earlier Thomas Massie incident. I want to thank everyone for joining us on Kentucky's Voice. Come back next week for more talk.